Wicked for Good, it's packed with a lot of pathos, but it just lacks so much focus. It's a stunning world that doesn't quite know when to move or even when to breathe. Again, it's just the pacing is all over the place. And the story, the story doesn't completely collapse. Again, there are a number of nice emotional moments that I think a lot of people will really enjoy, that we'll probably even get teary-eyed with, but it just wanders. It wanders so much. And in Oz, wandering comes the cost of the wonder. That was just always present in the original movie. That first film had so much confidence in itself, and this one just doesn't feel confident. It doesn't feel confident enough in the material, and it just makes me go like, maybe we should have just combined, these two films into one. I think that, honestly, in hindsight, of course it's 2020, that just would have been better. All right, my friends, we have a big new release this week, Sisu Road to Revenge. I haven't seen the movie, sadly. I will eventually see it, but no. There was another big release this week, and it is the sequel to Wicked, which was such a huge smash hit last year. And, of course, that movie is Wicked for Good. Now, I'll be honest at the top, I had my misgivings about the original Wicked. I didn't really like a lot of the trailers all that much. I was unfamiliar with the stage musical. I was unfamiliar with the book, which, of course, led to the stage musical and the movie. But, of course, I ended up seeing it, and I really enjoyed it a lot. I thought it was great. The production design, I thought, was stellar. A number of the performances were really good, particularly Cynthia Erivo, Ariana Grande. Really liked, the comedic sensibilities of Ariana Grande in that movie. And, yeah, it was just a really cool take on, L. Frank Baum's Oz. Of course, was the original author of, the Wizard of Oz books. And I am a fan of a number of Wizard of Oz adaptations. Of course, the original one from the 1930s, starring Judy Garland as Dorothy Gale, and, of course, Margaret Hamilton as the Wicked Witch of the West. Wonderful performance, just traumatizing children for decades. Really, really good, of course. But then other, more obscure adaptations, like the 1980s Return Oz, I thought was really cool. Just this dark 80s fantasy, which I'm really into. Just loved how, Oz itself was at the brink of disaster because of the Gnome King, of course, and Dorothy meeting all these very weird new friends. I have a great appreciation for that film. But of course, Wicked, I thought was great too, obviously. But what about, Wicked for Good? Well, Wicked for Good, of course, is directed by John M. Chu, who, of course, is returning from directing the first film. And it picks up 5 years after Elphaba's defiant flight at the end of the first film when she defied the wizard and his various acolytes. And she's essentially now living in exile, and she's fighting for the rights of Oz's silenced animals from this hidden forest refuge, all the while trying to just expose the corrupt regime of the wizard, which is getting worse and worse and worse. And meanwhile, Glinda, she's essentially become the public face of the wizard's rule. Now, I'm going to get this out of the way very quickly. Is this movie as good as the first Wicked? No, it's just not. Nope. Not at all. It doesn't reach the same heights as the first film, really. And it suffers from a number of issues. However, it does have a number of things that I did like and I think should be praised, should be highlighted. The film's technical artistry in particular, I think, is very confident, it's very tactile, leans heavily into practical effects, practical construction, creating spaces that I think the actors can truly inhabit rather than just imagine, rather than just settling for constant green screen, volume, dreamscapes, that kind of thing. We have these massive physical environments, right, that just don't dazzle, but I think also help kind of ground the fantasy. Again, Oz is very tactile here. It grounds Oz and makes it feel, honestly, just great to look at, right? I think you'll have appreciation for that. I certainly did. And I think the choice to rely on practical sets just makes the film's visual effects feel more grounded and than most contemporary fantasy stuff that we've gotten, which just uses green screen and the volume so often. It kind of really takes you out of it. When CGI, of course, does enter the frame, and it's obviously there. It exists as support rather than just overwhelm you, right? And I think the film just treats the digital the augmentation as a finishing tool, not the foundation, which I think is very smart. The magic in turn feels good, feels physical, looks really nice. Objects have a sense of weight to them, right? and the illusions themselves like have texture, which I think is really, really cool. And of course, the costume and makeup, much like in the first film, are equally wonderful as well. I have no issue with the technical craft of this film, but when it comes to the characters and the story, that's when we get into trouble. And the issues become very apparent very quickly, sadly. Narratively, to be more positive, at the heart of the film are, of course, Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande as Elphaba and Glinda, respectively, whose chemistry is one of the strong points of the entire story. Erivo's work, I think, is very good. And her rendition of kind of the big song of this movie, of "No Good Deed," I think is also great. It's no Defying Gravity, right? But it has a lot of anguish, has a lot of fury, and it works really, really well. She does a great job in the film. But as I said, no new song to me manages to really reach the heights of the previous film, at least in my opinion. It's not like the music's bad, but it's just this is just not as good as the first. Grande, meanwhile, she gets more narrative weight this time around, and it's pushing her to the forefront even more than I think the first film, dramatically that is. She's not only, just a vocal, showpiece, which I think a lot of people kind of view her as, but a more dramatic one. And I think she does well throughout the movie. Personally, I don't know. I preferred her more in the first film, and I like seeing her comedic chops in that movie more. There's still some funny stuff with her in this film, but it's much more serious. And not that she's terrible in those scenes. I'm not saying that at all, but I just preferred her in that first one. She was just more fun. But again, the material's darker, so I get it. But, despite that, both performances, I think, capture the tragic arc of a friendship that has been strained by politics and perceptions and betrayal. And the emotional resonance of their fractured bond, I think, is where the film essentially finds its soul and is at its strongest. And I wish that was the case with the rest of the supporting characters, though. But that's where we start to get into a lot of the big problems with this movie. Supporting actors like Jonathan Bailey, Michelle Yeoh, Jeff Goldblum, Marisa Bode, I mean, you name them. You pick a supporting character in this movie. They do the best that they can with the material that they're given, but their roles just feel extremely limited in this movie. It's like we're just rushing through their scenes to just get to the next Elphaba and Glinda sequence, honestly. And a number of the subplots, particularly the Nessa Rose and the box subplot, and everything to do with the Munchkin Land, just feels so underserved. Just leaving portions of the ensemble cast just underdeveloped. Their characters underdeveloped. Despite an initial setup and I promised that we're going to get more into this, and we just kind of don't. Other plots are touched on but are abandoned for just more Elphaba and Glinda scenes. And those Elphaba and Glinda scenes are good, but I would have liked to have gotten more of those other characters. Everything with the Wizards regime, the animal rights conflict, again, they're all touched upon, yet are just not given the space to become really dramatically relevant to the film. It just all feels rushed. But then we have other sequences that just kind of meander and become quite dull after a while. This movie has stretches where it feels really slow. It's so weird, honestly. And then one of my biggest disappointments, the Wizard and Elphaba connection, which if you know, obviously. I mean, it's not like it was a well-kept secret even in the first film. It's handled in such a rushed way. And it ends in a very disappointing way. It's just so much more time could have been focused on that. That is a really interesting story that you could get into, you can dive into, and dissect, especially between those two characters. And the movie just doesn't do that. And I just don't understand why. It's very weird. If I were to compare it to another franchise, I would pretty much spoil what that is. Although I feel like everyone knows. But there's a connection between those two characters, and it's just not explored in a satisfying way. And I also thought that so much could have been done with Dorothy Gale and the classic Wizard of Oz characters. They changed them to some degree in some cases, obviously, but I was just so surprised by how little they have to do with everything. It just feels like a missed opportunity. I mean, Dorothy Gale, essentially, she's just a plot device in the film. And I just thought, Well, it'd be kind of cool to see Wicked's version of Dorothy Gale, and they don't really do anything with her. And I don't know if that's similar to the book or the stage play, but I don't know. I just feel like this is another big missed opportunity to explore like one of the more, one of the most iconic characters from the original source material. It's honestly, it's a bloated, uneven movie, that is just punctuated by some good, even impressive moments. But it never once, in my opinion, lives up to the grandeur or the quality of its predecessor. In the end, just Wicked for Good, it's packed with a lot of pathos, but it just lacks so much focus. It's a stunning world that doesn't quite know when to move or even when to breathe. Again, it's just the pacing is all over the place. And the story doesn't completely collapse. Again, there are a number of nice emotional moments that I think a lot of people will really enjoy, that we'll probably even get teary-eyed with, but it just wanders. It wanders so much. And in Oz, wandering comes the cost of the wonder that was just always present in the original movie. That first film had so much confidence in itself, and this one just doesn't feel confident. It doesn't feel confident enough in the material, and it just makes me go like, maybe we should have just combined, these two films into one. I think that honestly, like in hindsight, of course it's 2020, that just would have been better, and maybe instead of making the first movie, it was 2.5 hours. I don't know the exact length, but maybe you can condense a lot. Clearly, since you don't really care about, all these other supporting characters, then just take, this movie, condense into an hour, slap it on the end of that, and boom. I think that probably would have been a lot better. But yeah, it's disappointing. Thankfully, nothing in the film is quite as bad or as awkward as the completely bizarre interviews that Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande have been doing. Have you guys seen that stuff? Wow. Just really fucking weird. Just so much crying. Again, actors, not all of them. Actors can sometimes be really weird when placed in, public places, but yeah, a little just, side note, if you will. But yeah, guys, Wicked for Good. I think there's some stuff that you can really enjoy in it, some things you can appreciate, and there certainly is great stuff about it, but it just does not live up to that first film at all. But what about you guys? What did you think of Wicked for Good? Did you love the movie? Were you kind of more mixed? I'm disappointed, honestly. Disappointed like me? Or did you downright hate it? You're like, Chris, more power to you, find the positives in this, but I don't like it, I hate it, and I don't like the first one either. Let me know.